Hey, it's Steve. This is part 2 in a series in which I'm building a small layout that I'll be donating to my son's school's silent auction. In this video, we're going to be ballasting the track, adding a small road that goes up towards a small train station and post office structure, adding those structures to the layout, applying general basic ground cover including static grass to much of the layout, staining some of the rock work on the mountainside, and starting work on a creek area that runs through the layout as well. So first off, let's take a look at the ballasting. Okay, so for applying ballast to the unit track, or really any type of track that has a roadbed in place either already or that you put on top of a cork roadbed or some other type of roadbed, what I typically do is paint a layer of glue along the edges of the track to help bind the ballast from the underside. And then I apply the ballast and then I soak everything with the glue mixture. Typically I just use scenic cement, and that helps to bind everything from the top down. And so the combination of the glue on the bottom and the top typically binds the ballast really well. So I'm starting out using some matte medium here. You can use plain white glue, but I have a bunch of matte medium, so I'm using that. And I'll go in here and apply a layer of glue to this bridge area. Got too much on there using kind of a big brush here, but I'm just gonna run the glue along the edge of the track as well as on the scenery alongside the track. And you want to be fairly generous with this. You don't want it to be super thick, but you do want to have a good continuous coating. Now again, this is kind of unit track. You don't actually have to ballast it. You can just run your scenery right up to the edge of the track and that'll look pretty good. I do still like to put ballast along the edge of the track. That helps to kind of blend things together better with the scenery. Kind of hides the joints between the track sections and that kind of thing. Again, for the ballast, I'm using the Arizona Rock and Mineral Northern Pacific medium gray granite. This one though does match the color of the unit track pretty well. You can kind of see here it is a very close match. And that is one reason why I do use this particular kind of ballast. And so I'm just going to go ahead and add the ballast to a small cup. That makes it easier to dispense. Using a spoon can help apply the ballast as well. And when I have the ballast applied more or less like I want it, I'll go ahead using some rubbing alcohol in a spray bottle and spray that down. And that's going to allow the scenic cement to flow into the ballast much easier. There are some areas there where the ballast did get a little bit disturbed, and I'll go ahead and touch those up here in a little bit. Just be careful putting the glue down so you don't spray it down too hard, and which will wash the ballast away. So gentle drops of glue will help keep the ballast in place and prevent it from getting washed out. So then I'll come back and apply a little bit more ballast in the areas where it's not quite covering the track like I want. Okay, with the ballasting complete, it was time to move on to the roadway, which is going to run underneath the bridge and up towards a small train station. And so I started out using some wall spackle to smooth out the road area that does head up towards the train station. Now, the spackle material smoothed everything out to the best that I could here. It didn't have to be perfect because I was going to go ahead and sand this later anyway. And then I did go ahead and nestle in the two structures that are going to be on this part of the layout. So it kind of would basically leave a mark in the plaster there where their footprints were. And then I could go through and scrape out those areas. And so the buildings would be sort of recessed into that plaster material. And so once that was on, I mixed up the final road surface material, which was a mix of the Woodland Scenics smooth it plaster material, which is kind of a really fine plaster material. I added some black paint to that, so it basically would be sort of a dark gray color. And so again, if the road did get chipped or dented or gouged or whatever, you wouldn't see white plaster through the paint surface. And then instead of adding water, since I was kind of lazy, didn't want to go into the house to get any, I just grabbed the scenic cement and threw that in there as well. So I just mixed that all up, made sort of a thick paint-like material that I could then just use a foam brush and paint on in multiple layers on the road surface area, kind of working it smooth. And you can see here what the final product looked like when it was done. So after some sanding, it made a really nice road surface. Now, because it is plaster, it does not have a very hard surface. So you can, again, scratch it easily and everything else. And so I did want to go ahead and still paint it. kind of provides a sealer to the plaster and kind of a little bit of a sort of a harder finish to the plaster as well. So the way I did everything here is I just covered everything with blue painter's tape that I didn't want to have covered in the spray paint. And then I kind of just spray bombed the whole area with several colors of gray spray paint to kind of get that nice mottled sort of look. So everything isn't quite even. There is variations in the shade. It's kind of subtle. You can't notice it maybe too well on camera, but it looks a little bit better in person where you can see the variations in shade from the different colors of spray paint. And that kind of provides sort of more of a natural look. So with the road in place, I went ahead and glued on the two structures. Just used some simple white Elmer's glue, PVA glue, to glue those structures down. Now with the post office structure towards the middle part of the layout, I didn't want to have it quite as far back as what the hole was for the wires to go through. Now there is a reason for this, because you'll notice there's kind of a flat area behind that structure, and that's because we actually have a small Christmas tree in a little pot that we can put on the layout in that one spot. So if someone wants to use it for a Christmas decoration layout, they can get that little tree, put it on there, and basically sort of have a nice Christmas type centerpiece. I'm even going to include some white powder flake snow from Woodland Scenics, so if they wanted to go ahead and sprinkle that on there, make it sort of a winter scene, they can make it a winter scene, and then vacuum it off and go back to sort of a regular, non-winter scene once Christmas is over, and leave the layout out year-round if they want to. And so I had to go ahead and fill that hole in. So what I basically just did was use some earth material. This is actually just real dirt. Added some of the plaster to smooth it, as well as some scenic cement, and mixed up a nice thick paste, which is kind of like spackle, but because it has dirt in it and plaster, it basically will harden and look like dirt essentially once it's dried up. So kind of just filled in that hole with that. Use a spoon to kind of smooth it out, and again, once that's dry, you can't, it makes a nice hard, really hard surface that would fill in that gap there, and prevent anything from falling through the hole there when I work on the scenery materials. Okay, so now that I have the road pavement down, I'm going to go ahead and mask off the road areas that I want to keep as pavement, so I can go ahead and apply glue and ground cover. Basically I'm going to start applying soil and things around the areas that I want to not be pavement, and this way I can get a nice clean edge. So once I've gone ahead and sprinkled down the dirt layer, I'll go ahead and soak everything with some rubbing alcohol and then put some more scenic cement on top of that. I'll go ahead and start working on the static grass, and I'm going to use sort of a combination of grasses. So this is some of the burnt grass, which is kind of a darker grass. I'm going to kind of go ahead and just mix in some other lengths and shades to kind of get more variety, so everything is not quite so uniform. And then some medium green, which is sort of the green end of the spectrum after having all the brownish colors. And I want to mix it up, but not really good. So I want to have definitely some variety in there where it's not an even mix. And so when I go ahead and apply it, I'm going to get sort of patches and variations in the shades of the static grass. So there's like 4 or 5 colors in here. And so hopefully that'll work out decently well. And I'm just basically using a file stuck on the end here to kind of act as something to touch the ground with to kind of complete the circuit here. At this point, I should be able to go ahead and pull the tape up to make sure it doesn't stick on there permanently. Now, a big part of the layout is the mountain area, and so I wanted to go ahead and get that scenic. So one thing I did here was basically add multiple colors of stain. And so it would dry fast. Instead of using water, I used rubbing alcohol and added a little bit of black paint to it to make sort of a dark stain that I applied first. And then again, I used more alcohol and brown paint to make sort of a brown stain, put that on there. And then I dry brushed everything with a little bit of white, and then kind of sprayed everything down with a little bit more rubbing alcohol to help blend things together. Now everything looks pretty dark right now, but it will lighten as it dries. Part of the darkness is just the fact that there's the wetness from the alcohol, and that kind of makes everything look a little bit darker than it really is. And we'll look here in a minute when everything dries, and you can see what the final product looks like. And when that was drying, I painted on more matte medium, sprinkled on the layers of dirt, added some ground foam and static grass, and then went ahead and added more of the scenic cement to glue all that in place. And I moved on to the last section of the layout that hadn't had any ground cover yet, did the same process in that area as well. So you can see here now, once everything has dried, how the rockwork looks pretty good. There's a variation in shading there, so it looks more realistic. And again, it's a little bit lighter than it was when you looked at it before. So you want to kind of shoot a little bit darker from what you want your final product to be, because it is going to lighten up when it dries. So at this point, it was time to move on to the river area. So I went ahead and added some talus material from Woodland Scenics, as well as some more of the dirt in the middle, and kind of built up my riverbed area there throughout that area, and then added a lot of scenic cement to making sure everything was glued in place very solidly. So to make the actual riverbed area, I'm going to use Mod Podge, the gloss media material. I'll also use the Woodland Scenics water effects to add ripples and waves and that kind of thing to the creek area, especially in the areas that are a little bit steeper where you would tend to see rougher water. A lot of times I'd like to use like EnviroTex and things like that to make a really nice water, but this is all a sloped creek area, so if I did that, I would just run right off the edge and it wouldn't really work very well. So I'm using the Mod Podge since it's kind of more like a thick paint, and that kind of stays in place wherever you put it. So I applied on a thick layer of the gloss medium, and that is going to take quite a while to dry, and I'll have to build this up in multiple layers. So I'll kind of come back every day or so, add another layer on, and it'll only take a minute or two to do, and so I'll kind of build that up over the course of a few days. And so I'll just keep doing it until I get it to the way that I want it to look. So the first coat of gloss medium is not quite dry, and I'll have to add a few more coats before that's done, and then I'll go ahead and add the water effects once I have all the gloss medium down that I want. And I'll use that to add ripples and such kind of in the steeper areas of the creek. And then that'll take care of the creek areas. And then I'll move on to doing all the rest of the scenery work, adding in all the trees and other ground covers that I plan to add. And that will, for the most part, be the bulk of the layout. I'll have to go through and paint the sides, also finish up the wiring. And so I'll have all of that in the third and last video in the series. So anyway, that's all for now, and thanks for watching. Bye.